them, if you don't talk to me, I won't talk to you back, that's all.
Do most of them answer you back, or they make believe they don't even hear you?
Well, I think most of them talk to me.
How about Ted Williams? Does he answer back, or don't you bother speaking to him?
Actually, I'm not.
I see.
A lot of people think I'm arguing when I turn, but I'm just talking to him, that's all.
You don't turn around...
And it isn't balls and strikes, I'm talking to him about.
It's not, huh?
No, it isn't.
Well,
So you clicked because Yogi Berra had 7 MLB legends he never forgave. And do you want to know how the guy who made everyone laugh could hold grudges for decades? Here is the truth. Yogi Berra was lovable and funny, one of the most respected players in baseball history. But underneath was a man with an iron code. He never forgot when someone crossed the line. He remembered every betrayal, every broken promise, and every moment when the game he loved was treated with disrespect. The question is, why a catcher would remember these things forever? I am Mason, and this is Baseball Icons. To understand Yogi's grudges, you need to understand the catcher position. The catcher is the architect, the psychologist, the judge. He sees everything on that diamond. Every pitch, every swing, every runner. He is the only player who faces the entire field at once, crouching behind the plate for 9 grueling innings, calling every pitch, reading every batter, managing his pitcher, and making split-second decisions. It is the most exhausting position in baseball, physically and mentally. Your knees take a beating, your hands get broken, foul tips smash into your mask. But the mental toll is worse. You have to remember every hitter's weakness, every pitcher's strength, every situation. And all of that creates something unique in a catcher's brain: tactile memory. When Yogi tagged a runner out at the plate, he did not just see it, he felt it. He felt the leather of his glove make contact with the uniform before the foot could touch home plate. That sensation was burned into his memory like a scar. When someone made him a promise, he remembered it, the same way he remembered the weight of a baseball in his hand. When someone broke that promise or violated the code of the game, it created a permanent cognitive dissonance in his mind. And speaking of supporting great content, if you are enjoying this deep dive into Yogi Berra's life, use the hype feature right now and give this video some hype. It helps us keep bringing you these incredible baseball stories. These 7 feuds were not about ego or being petty. They were about honor, respect, fairness, and the right way to play baseball. George Steinbrenner broke his word. Jackie Robinson stole home in a play Yogi swore was out. Early Wynn threw at his head. Larry Goetz made himself the star. Ted Williams exhausted his mind. Joe DiMaggio kept his distance. Frank Robinson symbolized time running out. Number 7, George Steinbrenner. Let me start with the most recent betrayal, because this one cut Yogi the deepest. Picture this. It is 1985, and Yogi Berra is managing the New York Yankees for the second time in his career. This is not some rookie getting his first shot. This is Yogi Berra. 10 World Series rings as a player, 18 All-Star selections, 3 MVP awards, a Yankees legend who had given his entire adult life to that organization. He was loved by the fans. He was respected by the players. He was trusted by everyone who understood what the Yankees truly meant. And George Steinbrenner, the volatile and demanding owner of the Yankees, looked Yogi in the eye and made him a promise. He promised Yogi that no matter what happened in April, no matter what happened in May, Yogi would have the entire 1985 season to stabilize the team and get them back on track. A full year. That was the deal. Steinbrenner gave Yogi his word. And for a man like Yogi, a man who had been raised to believe that your word was your bond, that promise meant everything. So the season started, and the Yankees struggled out of the gate. After 16 games, they were 6 wins and 10 losses. Not great, sure, but also not unexpected for a team in transition. Any reasonable person would understand that 16 games is not enough time to judge a manager. But Steinbrenner was not reasonable. He fired Yogi and replaced him with Billy Martin, a manager who had already been hired and fired by Steinbrenner multiple times. But here is the part that made it absolutely unforgivable. Steinbrenner did not have the courage, the basic human decency, to fire Yogi himself. He sent general manager Clyde King to deliver the news in the clubhouse. Think about what that means. Yogi Berra, a man who had bled Yankee pinstripes, who had caught in more World Series games than anyone in history, was fired by a messenger. Not face-to-face, not with a handshake and an explanation, just a cold corporate dismissal delivered by someone else while Steinbrenner hid in his office. Yogi understood that managers get fired. He was a pragmatist. But this was not about losing the job. This was about respect. This was about honor. This was about treating a legend with the basic dignity he had earned. And Steinbrenner failed that test completely. So Yogi walked out of Yankee Stadium that day and made a vow. He would never return to that building as long as George Steinbrenner owned the team, and he meant every word of it. For 14 years, Yogi Berra stayed away. The Yankees held old-timers games, and Yogi was not there. They unveiled monuments and retired numbers, and Yogi was not there. They sent invitations. They made phone calls. The fans wanted him there. The players wanted him there, but Yogi refused. He would not set foot in Yankee Stadium because his word meant something, and Steinbrenner had broken his. That exile lasted from 1985 to 1999. 14 years of missing the place he loved, all because he refused to let a broken promise slide. Then something extraordinary happened. In January 1999, Joe DiMaggio, the great Yankee Clipper, was on his deathbed. DiMaggio told Steinbrenner that he needed to make things right. He needed to apologize. But it could not be a phone call. It could not be a letter. It had to be face-to-face. On January 5th, 1999, George Steinbrenner traveled to the Yogi Berra Museum in New Jersey. He walked through those doors, looked Yogi in the eye, and apologized. He admitted that firing Yogi the way he did was the worst mistake he had ever made in baseball. And Yogi, being the man he was, accepted the apology. On July 18th, 1999, the Yankees held Yogi Berra Day. Yogi returned to Yankee Stadium for the first time in 14 years. And on that same day, in what can only be described as a moment of cosmic justice, David Cone pitched a perfect game. It was like the baseball gods were confirming that honor and integrity still mattered. Yogi forgave Steinbrenner, but he never forgot. The feud ended, not because Yogi was petty and finally let it go, but because Steinbrenner finally showed the respect that Yogi had deserved all along. Number 6. Jackie Robinson. This feud was completely different. It was not about disrespect or broken promises. It was about a single moment frozen in time. A moment in the 1955 World Series that Yogi Berra believed, with every fiber of his being, was the wrong call. Game 1, 8th inning, Yankee Stadium. The Brooklyn Dodgers, the eternal bridesmaids to the Yankee dynasty, were trailing the Yankees 6-4. They were desperate. They needed something miraculous. Jackie Robinson, one of the most daring and aggressive base runners in the history of baseball, was standing on third base. This was not just any runner. This was Jackie Robinson, the man who had broken the color barrier, the man who played with a fire and intensity that made him one of the most dangerous players on any diamond. Whitey Ford was on the mound for the Yankees. Yogi was crouched behind the plate, his mask on, his mind sharp, his body ready. Ford and Yogi had worked together for years. They knew each other's rhythms. They could communicate with a glance. And they had set a trap for Robinson. Ford used a slow, deliberate windup, stretching out the motion, baiting Robinson into thinking he had time to steal home. It was a psychological ploy, a chess move designed to exploit Robinson's aggressive instincts. And Robinson took the bait. He broke for home. The moment Robinson committed, Ford snapped the ball to Yogi. The ball arrived. Yogi caught it cleanly. Robinson was sliding head first, his body stretched out, his foot reaching for the plate. And Yogi brought the glove down and made the tag. Out. That is what Yogi felt. That is what Yogi knew with absolute certainty. His glove made contact with Robinson's body before Robinson's foot could touch home plate. He felt the impact, the tactile memory of a catcher who had done this exact play 1,000 times before, told him, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that Jackie Robinson was out. But umpire Bill Summers, standing right there, called him safe. Safe. Yogi exploded. He ripped off his mask and screamed at Summers with a fury that shocked everyone in the stadium. This was not the jovial, friendly Yogi that everyone knew. This was a man whose reality had just been contradicted by an umpire's call. Yogi was not angry because he wanted to win the argument. He was angry because the call violated what he knew to be true. This was not a close play where you could see it either way. This was, in Yogi's mind, a clear and obvious out. And the umpire had gotten it wrong. But the feud went deeper than just the call itself. Yogi also believed that stealing home when you were trailing by 2 runs was bad baseball. It was showboating. It was a violation of the percentage-based strategy that had made the Yankees a dynasty. Robinson, of course, disagreed. He fired back that the only thing that was bad baseball was Yogi's tag. And that is when this became personal. That is when it stopped being about one play and became about 2 philosophies of baseball clashing head-on. Over the years, film evidence surfaced from different angles. Some of those angles seem to show that Robinson's foot might have touched the plate a split second before Yogi repositioned his glove. Analysts have debated it for decades. But Yogi never wavered. He maintained that Robinson was out until his dying days. And his stubbornness on this point was not about being difficult. It was about honoring the truth as he experienced it. The feud transformed into something beautiful and strange. For over 40 years, every single time Yogi met Jackie Robinson's widow, Rachel, the conversation started exactly the same way. Rachel would smile and say, "Safe." Yogi would smile back and say, "Out." And then they would both laugh and move on. It became a tradition, a ritual that honored both men. It was playful, but it was also rigid. Yogi would never, ever concede that point. Because to concede would be to deny what he knew in his bones to be true. Number 5, early Wynn. The 1950s were a different era of baseball. This was before pitch counts and analytics departments. This was rough, brutal, physical baseball where pitchers threw inside without hesitation and batters crowded the plate without fear. The American League pennant races between the New York Yankees and the Cleveland Indians were decided by razor-thin margins, sometimes just a few games separating the two teams at the end of the season. Every game mattered. Every at-bat mattered. And sitting at the center of the Cleveland Indians rotation was early Wynn, a Hall of Fame pitcher who built his entire reputation on one thing: intimidation. Wynn was not the hardest thrower. He was not the craftiest pitcher, but he was the most feared. And he cultivated that fear deliberately. He once famously said that he would knock down his own mother if she crowded the plate, and everybody who knew him believed that he meant it. Wynn threw purpose pitches, fastballs aimed directly at the head or the ribs, designed to move batters off the plate and make them think twice about digging in. And he threw at Yogi Berra more than he threw at anyone else. Why Yogi? Because Yogi was an impossible hitter to deal with. Yogi was an aggressive, bad ball hitter who could make contact with anything. He swung at pitches in the dirt, he swung at pitches over his head, he swung at pitches 6 inches outside the zone, and somehow found a way to drive them for hits. He was nearly impossible to strike out because he could hit bad pitches just as well as he could hit good ones. For most pitchers, that was frustrating. For early Wynn, it was a challenge that demanded a physical response. Wynn decided that if he could not get Yogi out with his pitches, he would get him out by making him afraid. He threw at Yogi's head. He threw at his ribs. He tried to plant the seed of fear in Yogi's mind, to make Yogi hesitate before stepping into the batter's box. But Yogi never backed down, not once. He took the punishment. He wore the bruises. He absorbed the pain. And then he stayed in the box and kept hitting. The friction between Yogi and Wynn was a product of the high-stakes environment they were playing in. The Yankees and Indians were battling for the pennant year after year. In some seasons, they were separated by only a handful of games. Every plate appearance between Yogi and Wynn felt like a war within the war. Yogi accepted the physical toll of being a catcher. He understood that catching meant broken fingers, foul tips to the mask, and collisions at the plate. He understood that pain was part of the job, but he drew a line at deliberate headhunting. Baseball was supposed to be tough, yes, but it was not supposed to be about genuine endangerment. It was not supposed to be about trying to end someone's career with a fastball to the skull. Wynn crossed that line repeatedly, and Yogi never forgave him for it. The feud between Yogi and early Wynn was a form of cold respect. It was not loud, it was not public, but it was deeply felt. Yogi never yielded his ground at the plate. He never showed fear, and Wynn never stopped throwing at him. It was a battle of wills that lasted for years. Number 4, Larry Goetz. The relationship between a catcher and a home plate umpire is the most intimate and delicate relationship in all of professional sports. Think about it. For 9 innings, sometimes longer, these two men stand inches apart from each other. They talk, they argue, they negotiate, they build a rapport. A good catcher knows exactly how to work an umpire. He knows how to frame a borderline pitch to make it look like a strike. He knows how to sell a call without being obvious about it. He knows how to build trust, how to make the umpire feel respected, and how to gradually expand the strike zone in his favor as the game goes on. Yogi Berra was a master at this. He could charm umpires. He could joke with them between pitches. He could make them feel like they were part of the team without crossing the line into manipulation. He understood that umpires were human beings doing a difficult job, and if you treated them with respect, they would give you the benefit of the doubt on close calls. But with National League umpire Larry Goetz, none of that worked. Larry Goetz was a rigid disciplinarian. He had little patience for player complaints, for bench jockeying, or for anything that he considered even remotely disrespectful to his authority. And he was quick to eject players who crossed the line, or even players who came close to crossing the line. The conflict between Yogi and Goetz reached its peak in 1954, a year of significant tension across baseball. Yogi found Goetz's officiating to be completely unfair, particularly his willingness to eject players without even trying to de-escalate the situation first. A good umpire, in Yogi's view, understood that tempers flare in the heat of competition. A good umpire gave players a chance to vent, to blow off steam, and then to get back to playing the game. A good umpire had thick skin and did not take every comment as a personal attack. But Goetz was not that kind of umpire. Goetz seemed to view every disagreement as a challenge to his authority, and he responded by asserting his power. He turned arguments into ejections. He turned disagreements into power plays. He made himself the focal point of the game instead of staying in the background where umpires belong. For Yogi, the best umpires were the ones who remained invisible. They made the right calls, they managed the game quietly, and they let the players determine the outcome on the field. The game should belong to the players, not to the officials. When an umpire makes himself the star of the show, when an umpire prioritizes his ego over the integrity of the competition, he is violating everything that baseball is supposed to be about. And Larry Goetz, in Yogi's view, made himself the star far too often. Yogi's resentment of Goetz was rooted in a belief that an umpire's ego should never override the flow of the game. Baseball is a player's game. The umpires are there to enforce the rules, not to impose their personalities on the competition. And when Goetz crossed that line, when he let his pride and his need for control take over, Yogi saw it as a betrayal of the game itself. That is why Yogi never forgave him. It was not about one bad call or one heated argument. It was about a fundamental disagreement over what an umpire's role should be. Number 3, Ted Williams. This feud was unlike any of the others. It was not physical. It was not loud. There were no shouting matches, no public confrontations, no dramatic moments that made the highlight reels. This was a quiet, exhausting, mental war that played out over hundreds of at-bats across multiple seasons. Ted Williams, the splendid splinter, was the most scientific hitter of his generation. He did not just swing at pitches. He studied them. He analyzed the rotation of the ball as it left the pitcher's hand. He broke down the mechanics of every pitcher he faced, memorizing their release points, their arm angles, their tendencies in different counts. He turned hitting into a science, a discipline that required obsessive attention to detail. Williams could tell you the exact spin rate of a curveball, the precise angle of a slider, the subtle differences between a two-seam and a four-seam fastball. He was a perfectionist who demanded perfection from himself on every single swing. Yogi, on the other hand, was the exact opposite. Yogi was an intuitive strategist. He did not analyze, he felt. He called games based on instinct, on the posture of the hitter, on the rhythm and momentum of the game. He trusted his gut. He did not need to break everything down into numbers and mechanics. He just knew. And every single time Ted Williams stepped into the batter's box against the Yankees, Yogi had to match his intellect. It was a chess match. Williams was trying to solve the pitcher, to figure out the pattern, to predict what was coming next. Yogi was trying to solve Williams, to stay one step ahead, to call pitches that would disrupt Williams' calculations. And neither man ever fully succeeded. The mental burden of facing Williams was absolutely exhausting. Yogi famously tried to distract Williams with conversation during at-bats. He would talk to him, make jokes, ask him questions, anything to break that laser focus. But Williams had an impenetrable concentration. He ignored Yogi completely. He locked in on the pitcher, analyzing every movement, every twitch, every breath. Nothing could break through that wall. And that made the challenge even harder for Yogi. Williams forced Yogi to invent new defensive shifts, to create pitching sequences that had never been tried before, to push the absolute limits of what catchers were doing in the 1950s. The Ted Williams defense, where fielders were positioned in unusual spots to counter Williams' tendency to pull the ball, became a staple of the era. But for Yogi, it represented something else. It represented a constant state of cognitive stress, a never-ending battle that drained his mental energy game after game after game. Williams never forgave a pitch that caught too much of the plate. He punished mistakes with ruthless efficiency. And Yogi never forgave himself for the rare occasions when Williams gained the upper hand, when Williams figured out the pattern and launched a home run or drove in the winning run. This feud was not about hatred. It was not about personal animosity. It was about the sheer mental exhaustion of trying to outsmart the smartest hitter in baseball. And for Yogi, a man who prided himself on his intelligence and his strategic mind, that exhaustion was something he could never quite forget. Number 2, Joe DiMaggio. This feud was quiet, cold, and rooted in something that most fans never saw. It was not about what happened on the field. It was about what happened in the clubhouse. in the locker room, in the private spaces where teams are built and cultures are formed. When Yogi Berra joined the New York Yankees in the late 1940s, Joe DiMaggio was already a legend. He was the Yankee Clipper, a regal and aloof figure who carried himself with the dignity of royalty. DiMaggio was not just the best player on the team. He was the face of the franchise, the symbol of everything the Yankees represented. And he maintained a strict distance from younger players. He did not mix with them socially. He did not joke around in the clubhouse. He expected deference, and he got it. DiMaggio believed in hierarchy. He believed that veterans should be respected, that stars should be treated differently, and that the clubhouse should reflect the natural order of talent and experience. And for a while, that system worked. But then, Yogi started to emerge as a star in his own right. Yogi won his first MVP award, then his second, then his third. He became the emotional heart of the team, the player that everyone gravitated towards, the guy who made the clubhouse feel like a family instead of a corporation. And Yogi was the exact opposite of DiMaggio in every way. Yogi was talkative. He was approachable. He was humble. He joked with rookies. He asked questions. He treated everyone the same, whether they were a Hall of Famer or a backup infielder. His public persona was a direct contrast to DiMaggio's silent dignity. Yogi had a face that people described as homely, a voice that sounded more like a construction worker than a superstar, and a personality that was warm and unpretentious. And the fans absolutely loved him for it. DiMaggio reportedly struggled with this. He saw Yogi's rising popularity as a challenge to his own status. He saw the shift in the clubhouse culture, the way players started to rally around Yogi instead of deferring to DiMaggio, and it created a tension that was never openly discussed but was always present. For Yogi, the unforgiven aspect of the DiMaggio relationship was the Clippers' refusal to embrace the team as family concept that Yogi championed. Yogi believed that a team should be a brotherhood. He believed that the locker room should be a place where everyone felt valued, where egos were checked at the door, where the goal was winning together, not maintaining individual status. But DiMaggio clung to his hierarchy. He maintained his distance. And even as Yogi became a three-time MVP and the heart of the Yankees dynasty, DiMaggio never fully accepted him as an equal. It is worth noting that DiMaggio played a role in mediating the Steinbrenner feud years later, which suggests that there was some reconciliation near the end of DiMaggio's life. DiMaggio, on his deathbed, told Steinbrenner to make things right with Yogi, which shows that he recognized Yogi's importance to the Yankees' legacy. But for the years they shared the pinstripes, the friction was real. And Yogi never forgot the feeling of being iced out by his own teammate, of being treated as less than by a man who should have been his brother in arms. Number 1, Frank Robinson. This final feud is different from all the others because it was not really about Frank Robinson at all. It was about time. It was about decline. It was about the painful, inevitable realization that even legends cannot play forever, that even the greatest athletes eventually have to face the truth that their bodies are betraying them. In the 1961 World Series, the New York Yankees faced the Cincinnati Reds. Frank Robinson, the National League MVP, was the face of a new generation of baseball players. He was faster than the players of Yogi's era. He was stronger. He was more powerful. He represented the future of the sport, a future built on raw athleticism and explosive power. And by 1961, Yogi Berra was 36 years old. That might not sound old in normal life, but in baseball years, especially for a catcher, it is ancient. Yogi was no longer the starting catcher. He was splitting time between catching and playing left field, a position he was not comfortable with, to make room for Elston Howard, a younger and more athletic player who represented the Yankees' future. It was a transition that Yogi accepted intellectually, but struggled with emotionally. In Game 2 of that World Series, something happened that haunted Yogi for the rest of his life. Frank Robinson hit a fly ball to left field. Yogi, playing out of position, misjudged it. He misplayed the ball, turning what should have been a routine out into a 3-base error. Robinson scored. The Reds capitalized on the mistake. And Yogi stood in left field, a position that was never meant for a catcher, feeling the weight of his own decline crushing him. For a player whose entire career had been built on defensive reliability, this mistake was intolerable. Yogi had caught in more World Series games than anyone in history. He had a reputation for being steady, reliable, clutch. He was the guy you could count on in the biggest moments. And now, in front of the entire baseball world, with millions of people watching, he had made a mistake that cost his team runs. The resentment Yogi felt towards Frank Robinson was not personal. Robinson had not done anything wrong. He had simply done what good players do. He had taken advantage of a mistake. He had capitalized on an opportunity. He had played the game the way it was supposed to be played. But for Yogi, Robinson became a symbol. He was the symbol of the new generation, the faster and stronger players who were taking over the game. He was the symbol of everything that Yogi was no longer capable of being. He was the symbol of time itself, relentless and unstoppable, forcing even the greatest players to step aside. The unforgiven error of 1961 remained a permanent blemish on Yogi's otherwise sterling postseason record. It was a reminder that no matter how many championships you win, no matter how many MVP awards you earn, no matter how much you give to the game, time always wins in the end. And Frank Robinson, through no fault of his own, became the face of that painful truth. This was not a feud born of anger or disrespect. It was a feud born of heartbreak, of watching yourself become obsolete, of knowing that the game you love is moving on without you. Because Yogi held himself to the same impossible standard that Williams held himself to. Joe DiMaggio embodied the code of hierarchy over family. DiMaggio believed in a clubhouse culture where stars were treated differently, where deference was expected, where distance was a virtue. Yogi believed in the opposite. He believed in a team as a family, where everyone was valued, where humility mattered more than status. The tension between those two philosophies created a coldness that Yogi never forgot. And Frank Robinson, through no fault of his own, represented the code of time, the unstoppable march of decline that every athlete must eventually face. The painful truth that no matter how great you are, no matter how many championships you win, the game will move on without you. And Yogi, standing in left field, watching a younger, faster player capitalize on his mistake, felt the full weight of that truth crushing him. When you line up these 7 feuds, you see a pattern. Every single one of them is about Yogi holding the game to a higher standard. He refused to let broken promises slide. He refused to let bad calls go unchallenged. He refused to let intimidation tactics be normalized. He refused to let umpire egos take over the game. He refused to give himself a pass when he failed to match the excellence of others. He refused to accept hierarchical coldness in a team setting, and he refused to accept the inevitability of decline without feeling the pain of it. These were not the grudges of a petty man. These were the grudges of a man who cared so deeply about the integrity of baseball that he could not let a single injustice, real or perceived, be forgotten. But here is what makes Yogi's story so beautiful. He was capable of forgiveness. He was capable of letting go when someone showed real respect, when someone proved that they understood what they had done wrong. Look at what happened with George Steinbrenner. Yogi held that grudge for 14 years. 14 years of refusing to step foot in Yankee Stadium. But when Steinbrenner finally came to him, face to face, and apologized with genuine humility, Yogi forgave him immediately. He did not drag it out. He did not make Steinbrenner grovel. He accepted the apology, returned to the stadium, and moved forward. That tells you that Yogi's grudges were not about cruelty. They were about principles. When the principle was honored, the grudge could end. Look at what happened with Jackie Robinson. Yogi and Rachel Robinson turned their disagreement into a playful ritual that lasted for over 40 years. Safe, out. Safe, out. It became a tradition that honored both men. It was rigid, yes, but it was also filled with warmth and mutual respect. Yogi never conceded the point, but he also never let it poison the relationship. That is the mark of a man who knows how to hold a grudge without letting it consume him. Even with Joe DiMaggio, there was reconciliation at the end. DiMaggio, on his deathbed, recognized Yogi's importance to the Yankees' legacy and used his final days to bring Yogi and Steinbrenner back together. That suggests that whatever coldness had existed between them, there was also a deep respect that endured. Yogi's ability to forgive when respect was shown, his ability to turn grudges into rituals, his ability to hold people accountable without destroying relationships, all of that shows you that his so-called unforgiveness was actually a form of love. It was love for the game. It was love for the code. It was love for the idea that baseball should be played the right way, managed the right way, officiated the right way, and honored the right way. Yogi Berra held grudges because he held the game to a higher standard. And by refusing to let injustices be forgotten, he ensured that baseball remained a place where honor mattered, where integrity mattered, and where the right way to play was more important than winning at any cost. That is the legacy of Yogi Berra. Not just the 10 championships, not just the 18 All-Star selections, not just the 3 MVP awards, not just the Yogiisms that made people laugh. His legacy is standing up for what is right, even when it means holding a grudge for decades. His legacy is refusing to let disrespect slide, refusing to let broken promises go unanswered, refusing to let the code be violated without consequence. His legacy is showing us that integrity is not about being nice all the time. It is about knowing what you stand for and refusing to compromise on those principles, even when it costs you, even when it makes you look stubborn, even when the whole world is telling you to let it go. Yogi Berra never let it go, and baseball is better for it. So if you enjoyed learning about Yogi Berra and the 7 legends he never forgave, make sure you hit that like button right now. Subscribe to Baseball Icons so you never miss another deep dive into the stories that made this game great. Drop a comment below and tell me which feud surprised you the most. Was it Steinbrenner? Was it Jackie Robinson? Was it the quiet mental war with Ted Williams? I want to hear your thoughts. And do not forget to use the hype feature one more time to support this channel and help us keep bringing you these incredible baseball stories. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.